Um, Without further ado, I would like to call on Paul Arah, our next speaker, getting started with Kubernetes. Have our next speaker approaching the stage.
Please, can everyone give Paul a round of applause?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's a nice day, and I hope you've been enjoying the conference so far. My name is Paul Arah, and today I will be talking about getting started with Kubernetes. Um, so I've got when I meet people, I hear people come to me, they ask me, what is Kubernetes? What does Kubernetes entails? And it's usually like, I saw a tweet a couple of days ago, someone was saying like the ecosystem is so vast and very difficult for a beginner to get started with, because there's just so much to learn, and you've got like this whole information overload. So kind of the goal of this talk is sort of like set like a baseline knowledge that would sort of like equip you with everything you need to know for everything you need to know when you want to work with Kubernetes. So irrespective of what you do, if you're a developer, if you're a technical writer, if you, whatever field you want to get involved with, and you want to understand like how Kubernetes fits into the picture. So that's kind of like the goal of this talk. So, so the first thing first, what's Kubernetes, right? I've seen a couple of definitions of Kubernetes, and if we're being honest, they're very, very accurate. The most popular one, like you would see from the Kubernetes website, is Kubernetes, also known as KATE, K8 and S, is an open source system for automating the deployment and scaling of containerized applications, right? The thing is, this definition is very accurate, but the problem is that there's so much context lacking. There's so much you need to know for you to understand actually what this means, right? So not sure why my slides are not working, but so why Kubernetes, right? So for you to really understand what Kubernetes, you need to understand where we came from before we got to this point, right? So the secret that holds everything together is containers, right? There's something called a container. So like back in the day for like all the developers here, right? You would, and it's still very popular today, right? You would build when you have your application, right? You have your Python code, you have your JavaScript code, irrespective of the language, you will take it and you'll put it on a server, right? And that's how you would expose like the server to the outside world, right? So like previously, like before like the advent of like the cloud and all of that, like the AWS and everything we have today, like back in the day, right? You would actually go and buy like a physical server. You would buy a physical server. You would employ someone that would actually manage that physical server, right? And you would also figure out like everything, manage that physical server yourself. So let's say the physical server needs to be cooled, the physical server needs access to the internet, and everything that concerns managing of that infrastructure, you have to do it physically, right? So somewhere along the line, um, we had I need to duplicate my see. Yep, that's too deep string. Right. We're just gonna work like this. Oh, where's my mouse? This is fine. All right, sorry about that. Um, yeah, so back in the day, right, um, when people moved on from provisioning like physical infrastructures, and you had like companies actually started offering this as a service. So we started having virtual machines. So people that have like that can actually own the manpower and the cost, big companies like AWS. This actually started from a company known as VMware. They basically they had like the actual physical servers, and they would take it and split it into smaller people, into smaller actual sort of like partitions, where and offer that as a service to like different people, right? And people would host their applications, right? But the problem with visualization is very resource intensive because you take, so imagine you have a laptop, like for people who use laptops and have like multiple operating systems on their laptops. For example, if you've ever tried to install Windows, you know how very tasking that process is and how much resource you use. So imagine you have like multiple Windows running on like the same laptop, how much resource intensive that is, right? Um, because of how resource intensive like virtualization was, people started figuring out a way, how do we achieve like the same sort of isolation, but in a very less resource intensive way? And that's how the whole concept of containers actually came up. So if you actually see from the demonstration right now, you've got like, in the case of virtualization, you've got like a system and different guest operating systems. So OS is like main operating system, and then you can put your application on like the different guest operating system, but it's still one single, let's just use the word PC, like in this context, it's still one single computer, right? But in the case of containers, containers actually allow you sort of make the isolation at the operating system level. So think a very good mental model to think of this is, think of like you have like I can have like one laptop and I have just one Windows installation, but somehow I have like multiple partitions inside that window installation that allows people to like host their different applications, right? And that's how like the whole concept of container falls into this. Right, so as people evolved, as things kept evolving, right, people started figuring out, okay, since we have like this, let's take our applications and break them into like smaller pieces. Like the very popular way of doing this is breaking it by your business domain, but people divide the applications into like smaller pieces. And that's it's called microservice. We wouldn't go like deep into this, but that's how people take, for example, you have an e-commerce app. You would take like the part that's responsible for its authentication and keep it as a separate entity. Take the part that's responsible for orders, keep it as a separate entity, right? And with all of this, so imagine like you had like one single application, but you took the application and then you broke it into like different pieces, right? You've taken what was supposed to be like a single unit and you break it into like different pieces. So something that was a single unit broken into different pieces, and you need to have all of them talking together, that introduces like a new level of complexity, right? And that whole complexity is how Kubernetes comes in. Kubernetes comes in to manage like the complexity of you having like your applications in like smaller containerized unit, right? The small pieces containerized unit that need to talk to each other, you need to bring them down, you need to stop them, you need to coordinate all the communication that happens between them, right? That's where Kubernetes comes in. So the challenges with modern application development, right? You've got complexity, right? If it was before, like you had all your application on a single server, if you were exhausting like the bandwidth on the server, you could just add more RAM or add more memory or something, right? But in this case, that's not the case because you have like your application broken into smaller pieces, spread across like multiple systems, right? And rolling updates. So the whole idea behind rolling updates is I want to be able to make a change to my application without having a downtime, right? So let's say you have a new version of your application. You don't want like a scenario where like you've got like this new version and then you have to turn off your application to put up the new version. Security and compliance, portability, monitoring, and debugging, right? So these are all like challenges, like with the way we build applications now. They all come with like the challenges. All right, so this falls back to the question, what is Kubernetes? And at this point, I believe the, the whole concept behind Kubernetes starts to make sense, right? Honestly haven't found like a better definition than this. I think this is the best definition, right? You just need like a lot of background context to understand what it means, right? But in our case now, Kubernetes is, we just know like it's an open source system that actually allows you, when you have your application broken down into like smaller different pieces, right? Kubernetes allows you to manage all of that, automates that process of managing it for you, right? Automates the process of scaling it for you and makes it like a much more sort of like standardized way of working with your applications when you have them inside a container. All right, so what does Kubernetes provide? It's a very short, I have like very limited time, that's why I'm running through it quickly, but you've got like automated rollouts and rollbacks. So rollouts, you basically, you can upgrade your app to a new version of your app, like, right? So for example, imagine you have a application and you added like a new feature today, right? You wanna expose that new feature to users, right? Kubernetes you can automate that process with Kubernetes, right? You don't have to turn down like the old version of your app to put up the new one, right? This all happens in the background without any downtime. You have service discovery and load balancing. Basically, since we have like these different containers, like very small pieces, like different, breaking different pieces, right? You need them to talk to each other. You need like, for example, your Earth service to know that there's another service that exists, right? Kubernetes handles all of that. You need storage for almost, this is like a very basic requirement for almost every application. You have to store something somewhere, right? Kubernetes provides a very extensible system for you to plug in whatever storage platform you're using. And self-healing, so suppose something happens, this is when you build, right? When you have an application, we know like things always feel like it's almost impossible for you to have 100% uptime, right? Things always fail, right? But Kubernetes has like has systems in place, has things in place that actually prevents that if something happens, a way of like recovery. That yeah. So secrets management and configuration. You need to store like if you in the previous sessions you could see like the speakers like talking about like API keys for working with different platforms, right? Kubernetes has like an inbuilt solution for that, and also has a way of extending for you to integrate other solutions. Horizontal scaling. So horizontal scaling is the whole idea of like horizontal scaling is basically vertical is like in the, let's say you have a single server, right? And let's say we hit the limits for that server. We have so many requests, so many people are trying to use our app at the same time, right? We will we will add more RAM or we'll add more memory or whatever the bottleneck is, we would increase it, right? But in the case of horizontal scaling, we can spread the same instance of that app across multiple servers, across multiple computers, and we wouldn't have like, that way we remove that bottleneck and we can, you would see people, you have people with as much as like a 5,000 nodes Kubernetes deployment. All right, so Kubernetes is also designed for extensibility. You've got like, there's an entire plugin ecosystem. There's an entire CRDs. You can write like your own controllers and extend Kubernetes to meet like this very specific use case you have. I think, the good part of this is, I would say, how to Kubernetes. So if you're curious about like, you want to play around with Kubernetes, you can always start from a very simple, you've got like local, simple setups you can try out locally. So this one popular one is Minikube, there's Kind, there's K3S, and there's a couple of others, right? You can try them out. They're easy, they're a very good start for like anyone trying to learn Kubernetes, right? But you also have the ones offered by managed Kubernetes providers, like your favorite cloud provider. So you've got like, this is some of like the popular ones. Learning Kubernetes, I would say if you're a beginner, you want to learn Kubernetes, like for anything, like the very first place you should go look at is the docs, right? To have like a very good overview of what you're trying to learn. And then Code Cloud is a very popular platform for people that learn in DevOps. You can always like go in there and learn like a couple of things. But they have very good Kubernetes material I would personally recommend. Tech with Nana, if you want like a free material, Tech with Nana also has a nice YouTube channel that gives like some very good introductory videos on how like the very basic concept of Kubernetes. Yeah, and you can break your company's Kubernetes deployment and don't hold me responsible. All right, the community. Uh, in our context here in Africa, we've got like the Kubernetes Community Day Africa. I don't know if Anita is here, but yeah, this Anita, a human, she's very involved with the community. If you know her, you can reach out to her. She's around. And Kubernetes also has like a very big Kubernetes Slack. You can always go there and ask whatever question you have. And there's also another community on data on Kubernetes that's concerned with running like stateful workloads on Kubernetes. So these are very good communities as a beginner. You can just go introduce yourself, and they have like all the necessary resources. And yeah, they've got like people that can point you in the right direction. Right, and the last thing I want to talk about is like the certifications available in the cloud native space in relation to Kubernetes. So we've got like the Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate. This is sort of like an introductory certification, right? And you've got the certified Kubernetes application developer certificate. So if you want to learn how to build applications on Kubernetes, this is for you. If you want to learn how to administer Kubernetes, then the certified Kubernetes administrator is another certification you can take. And lastly, if you want to learn how the security parts of Kubernetes, there's another certification related to the security part. And yeah, the certifications from Linux Foundations, they're very respected across like everywhere. So if you invest in them, you know like you've actually invested in something good. So thank you very much. Go forth and Kubernetes.